All right, we should be rolling here. So here we go with some brand new technology. Welcome in, guys. This is something that we wanted to do for a little while, which is to kind of take our podcasting here to the next level. Oops, we got a little technology already. One second here. I've got to get the here. Technology gets us. All right, so sorry about that. I had to kind of mute the background there. So not off to a great start here, but welcome in, guys. Here, this is kind of our initial rollout of the NENextt video cast. We wanted to take something to kind of a different level here. I started doing some podcasting on the fall seasons. I would do the Saturday morning recaps as well. And, we've got this great technology out here now. And, so many people are using this. The schools are using it right now with the current situation that we're in for the remote learning. And so we decided to go ahead and try out the Zoom here. And Coach Yonk, we appreciate you kind of being a guinea pig for us here to do some testing.
Oh, it's great. I think it's gives something to some people to watch and look at a little bit. And I think people are always, I think coaches I know are willing to do stuff like this. So this is fun.
Yeah, and you know what a great time to talk football. Like I said last week, I feel like with sports being kind of being down and out right now, that maybe we can help out a little bit and keep some people entertained because me, I could talk football 365 a year, and I know you can too. But it's a great time, I think, to do this, and hopefully, we'll provide a little bit of entertainment for people right now. Everybody's stuck at home, stuck inside a lot of times here too. But what cool technology that we have, though, to be able to be able to provide these type of things. So really excited here to have you on board tonight. We got a lot of different things that we want to talk about. So this will be great.
It's good. Yep. Let's go.
Yeah. So Tim Yonk, head coach at Omaha Creighton Prep, and you've been at Prep for is it 3 or 4 years or?
Yeah, this is finishing my third year.
Okay. Yep. And previously you were over at Omaha Gross for a little while too.
I was at Gross for 12 years. Prior to that, I was at Logan View High School from up in Northeast Nebraska from 2000 to 2006. And prior to that, I was at Gross as an assistant coach and teacher from 92 to 2000. So I've been a couple of different places. Been at places that have been really awesome schools, awesome school districts. Loved every minute of every that I was at all of those schools, and still have a lot of really good friends at all those schools. And so that's what's made it fun, being at a lot of those places. But feel very fortunate to be at Creighton Prep. One of the top jobs in the state of Nebraska.
No question about that. So we're definitely going to cover a lot of different topics here. We're going to cover the present. We're going to cover the past. We're going to take you back to the days at Schuyler as well.
It's a long time.
I'd kind of mentioned to you too. I said I want to go back and talk a little bit about '86 as well, and I've been able to.
It was a fun time. We had a great group of guys, that's for sure. So it'll be kind of fun to reminisce.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so let's talk about kind of the current state of affairs here as well. Unfortunately, world events are kind of coming into play here all over as well, not only from an education standpoint, but certainly from a football standpoint as well. And you and I kind of talked just briefly here before we went live about the effects that the COVID is kind of having on not only again the school, but the sport as well. So maybe just get into a little bit about, maybe the question is, what would you be doing right now if everything was normal at this time here, getting ready for the season as well? Because, as we know, especially at a larger school here, I mean, this is not a this is not a 3-month deal out of the year. I mean, this is you want to compete and you want to be really good at this sport, have a competitive team, compete for championships here. There's a year-round process, that needs to take place as well. So kind of talk about how that's affected your program currently right now, and maybe some of the things that you're doing to adapt to the situation.
Yeah, I mean, this time of year is really important. If we were in school, obviously, we encourage a lot of our guys, or all of our guys, to offer for multiple sports. And I really want our guys out for track, and we have a ton of those guys out for track. That was not the case when I first arrived at prep, and so we've been able to get those guys out for track. Even our big guys are throwers. I think it's great for their footwork, competitiveness, those kinds of things. But obviously, with those things on hold, you kind of put things on the back burner there a little bit in terms of what they're doing there. We have to be pretty creative, really, in terms of strength and conditioning right now, because that would be something that would be in full blast right now for our guys as we enter the spring season and the last 8 to 10 weeks of school before we get into our summer program. And so that, for everyone, I know, is a major concern. Trying to keep your guys, not being around your guys, but and holding them accountable, holding themselves accountable. I think we've talked to our guys a lot here this last week. I've met with each of our classes on Zoom of guys, and just continue to try to keep them motivated on what they can do, and not focus on what you can't do. Let's focus on what you can do. And so we've partnered up with Rack Performance, which is a company out of I don't know if it's Kansas City, or they were at one point. I know they're pretty hot and heavy in Kansas and Texas and Oklahoma, but they're starting to get here. And we used them when I was at Gross Catholic in our weight room. And so we teamed up with them actually just the other day, last week, and we have an app on all of our guys' phones that we can push workouts out to, both body weight workouts and actual weight training workouts, if they are lucky enough to have strength and conditioning facility, either they're in their house or a buddy's house, something like that, where they can go do that. So we have a lot. I mean, so we're pushing out all of those things for those guys now, just to keep on track, so that we can continue that. Because at the end of the day, if we lose 8 or 10 weeks going into the summer, it's going to be like starting over for us in terms of strength conditioning. I think that's the main concern for a lot of guys. If we were in school, there'd be some things we would be doing position wise, within the rules, obviously. In terms of dealing with our quarterbacks, we do a lot of development with our quarterbacks in the offseason, this time of the year, if they're not playing baseball. And so some of those things are on them. So we're pushing some of that stuff out, and they're going to have to kind of do that on their own. So it's turned everything kind of upside down in terms of, what you normally do. You've got to be creative a little bit and do that. So I know we're going to have a staff meeting here on the side in a couple of days. I know we're going to actually Zoom our offensive players and start just break down some things on Huddle for them on Zoom. We're going to do that on Wednesday. So again, try to keep them engaged in football, and try to keep them around football and thinking football, and at the same time, still try to get some teaching done and some work done with them too.
Yeah, I've heard with the gyms and the lifting and stuff. Somebody had mentioned today. They said, "Hey, you might have to go back to the old Herschel Walker workouts, push-ups and and things like that."
We did. I mean, those are the things we're pushing out to our guys, and just kind of letting them know this stuff will work if you do it, because it's proven. I don't think we have any walkers, but I think at least the workouts we know will be beneficial for them. It's better than doing nothing. Doing something is better than doing nothing. That's kind of what we've been telling them.
Yeah, and the one thing that none of us want to think about here is we don't really have a definite for how long this is going to go on, and hopefully that it doesn't go into the summer, and certainly. I don't want to even think about it. I'm cutting into the football season in any form or fashion at any level. But
Yeah, I feel bad for the spring sports and the spring coaches and those kids that have been training for their spring seasons, and you feel bad for them just because it's, unfortunate situation that they're in. Baseball at least will probably get some of their summer, if not all their summer season, but track and field, that's, they got
Yeah.
to go out and run track in the summertime. You can train and do that, but yeah, it's unfortunate for them.
Yeah, well, it's probably one of those things that you talk to the kids a lot about, where, sometimes just as in sports as in life, things are going to happen, and you've got to adapt and make the best out of your situation here as well. So, you being a longtime coach as well, I'm sure that it's one of those practice what you preach type of things. We tell the kids that all the time. Hey, you know what? Things are going to happen, find a way, overcome the adversity as well.
Right.
So probably a teachable moment in here as far as that goes too.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. I think those are things that I think will make them all better moving forward, and not just sports, but in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's talk a little bit. Last time, of course, we saw your team in the state playoffs. You drew into a pretty tough West Side team then that was able to reach the state finals as well, and you had seen them late in the year as well. And then when we jump over to your schedule, of course, you're going to open next season with them as well.
Yeah.
One of the great rivalries in Nebraska as well. So coach, anytime, of course, that you don't maybe finish the season on a high note like that, of course, you go into the next year, and there are certain things that you want to improve on, that you have to work on. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the keys and some of the things that when the season ended for you, that you said, hey, if we want to be a better team next year, this is what we have to do in the off season here. This is where we need to get better here, so that then we can take that next step forward.
Yeah, there's no question there. I mean, there was a few things pretty glaring for we ended our year last year that we needed to definitely address, and I think we've done that. But the one of them was just being more explosive in terms of just an athlete, and we've done some different things. We're doing some different things, thinking a little more outside the box in terms of strength and conditioning. And so we've made a change since Christmas with the way we're training our guys, and that'll continue forward for our guys. So that's already paid off. I mean, you can see, we had the shutdown. You could really see the work that our guys have been putting in, and the improvement that they've made in that area, or that's going to show up on the field for us for sure. And so just being a more explosive athlete, we have to be in terms of playmaking ability on offense. We need more playmakers touching the ball. We have those guys. We have those guys in our program. We've got to do a better job of identifying that, and that's more from a standpoint. I think we have to identify who those guys are and try to target guys a little bit more. And I think on the defensive side, I think we need to address and be better tacklers. I mean, we were not a very good tackling football team, and some of that goes back to the first thing that I talked about is just not being a very explosive athlete, especially with hip bend and being able to bend and move and be explosive and get your body in explosive positions. And so those things that we addressed, that we've talked about, we have a plan moving forward. Some of them we've already really started doing a lot in terms of especially the strength conditioning piece. But those are the three main things looked at that we need to get better at. We need to be tougher as a football team. Those are things that I think we can do and address in practice once we get into the fall. But we have to be a tougher football team physically, and if we do that, then we're going to be fine moving forward.
Yeah, this looks like a pretty good group of seniors, and I've kind of followed them since I started NENextt a few years back. Your current group of seniors was a freshman back then, and I thought at that time that there were four I thought there were four freshman groups in the metro that kind of stood out amongst the rest, and I thought it was Prep, Millard South, Elkhorn South, and West Side as well. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit about your seniors and what you have coming back, and maybe some of the leaders on your team that you'll have that'll play a key role for you guys this year.
You want me to talk about just our rising seniors? Is that what you
Sure.
want? Yeah. So our current juniors are our rising seniors. Really solid group of young men who played. We have a lot of really talented young guys in that class. And they're all really bought in to what we're doing. I think we have who I think are going to play in the fall, and so you talk about the guys that we have in that class. For example, is a guy that is getting a number of Power 5 offers. I think his spring and summer will be really important for him in terms of strength and conditioning, in terms of getting out to places that have not offered him and getting to their camps this summer, if that is able to happen. Because they're all in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. I know those juniors, unfortunately, are getting calls every day about junior days and official visits being canceled because of the whole coronavirus situation. But that it is what it is. And so, at that point, they're going to have to do some work once we can get back going to those places and visiting those schools. But he's a guy that has to have a big time year for us. And I think he's a guy that is capable of dominating football games. We have a lot of guys in this class, and I don't want to leave out any guys, but Alex Bullock would be another one that is played it exceptionally well for us last year. He was he started as a sophomore for us at corner, and then he was a two-way starter last year. I think he might be the most under-recruited kid in the city, and I tell everybody that. He's long, athletic, and really run. He's got great ball skills, super smart, football smart, and he is competitive as they come. And I think he is going to have a tremendous year. He's a great leader, really kind of a quiet kid. He leads by example with that. And then we've got a bunch of other kids who have a ton of ability and have worked really, really hard. And I like our seniors. I like the way they've read after the season was over and made it their own, and have done a great job both in the weight room and school. In this situation where we're not, in school, taking leadership role and trying to get guys together, and within rules, right, within the 10 people limit, and they're doing some throwing, they're doing some lifting together, they're doing some of the things. So that's an important, a really important group. Any coach would say you're as good as your seniors, and that has been the way it's been every year that when I have great seniors and great leadership, I have really good teams. And when I don't have great seniors, they're not as competitive. And you go as your seniors go.
Yeah, well, and certainly, again, I do cover a lot of the lower levels pretty closely, too, as well. So I'm familiar with some of the young talented kids that you have up, and it definitely is a thing where it's like, until you do it on varsity here, you're just trying to get there, right? But you did have some young kids, some freshmen that played last year on varsity, and a couple of them were represented on my NENextt Super State freshman team. Sam Sledge, who obviously was extremely physically ready to play as a freshman last year, and then John Pargo as well. And so talk maybe a little bit about some of the younger guys too that are going to have to contribute to what you guys are doing this year, again, to help you get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, there's one guy that I want to make sure I give a shout out to, because and that's Jack Stessman. Jack Stessman, I know he was on when he was a freshman. I think he was on that team as well. And first game of the year last year in the first quarter against North High, I think he carried the ball 7 times, and he was averaging about 5 to 7 yards a carry, and tore an ACL in the first quarter of that game. And Jack is a tremendous talent. And Jack has worked as hard as anyone I've ever seen recovering from an injury like this. And our running back room is very talented. We have a lot of very talented young men, and a lot of them are freshmen, sophomores, and that are going to challenge now. All right, because we didn't lose a senior. We didn't have a senior in at running back last year. Everybody else is back, and so we had a lot of good guys there that maybe weren't quite ready, but now they're ready, and now the young guys are going to push them. But Jack Stessman basically has told me he's going to make my job very easy in terms of deciding who's going to be the starting running back there. So it's that kind of attitude that he brings to the team, and I want to give him a shout out because he was absolutely super mature about the injury, about his rehab, about going to work and coming back even stronger than he was when he was a sophomore. So he's a kid that's going to have a tremendous year for us if we can keep him healthy, because I'm excited about him too. Then you talk about our young guys. I mean, we have a lot of very good young players in our program. Our freshman class, I think, is as talented as anybody in the city, from top to bottom. You mentioned a couple of them, Sam and John, and those guys were, those were letter winners for us at prep, and they've never lettered freshmen at prep before, and never have had two. And so, that was kind of unprecedented in that respect, but those guys were ready to play. Those guys were physically ready. They were emotionally ready to play. And those are the things you look at when you look at a young kid is, are they ready physically to play? And are they ready emotionally for that? Because that's a change from 8th grade football. All right. And so they both played a significant role in our team, special teams. Sam played and started a couple games at defensive tackle actually for us. But I think we're going to have two of the better tight ends in the city or in the state of Nebraska with him and AJ Rollins this year on offense. And so we're excited about having those guys and being able to see them a year older now after a year of maturity in the weight room and all of those things. So excited about that. Super excited about this freshman group because they bring a lot to the table. And we've added a piece. We've added a couple of pieces. One I'll talk about in terms of Parker Lizzie, we've added from Elkhorn South. His dad was a prep grad, but Parker is transferred to prep at the semester, and so he's been working out with us. He's out for track. He's been throwing. He goes all over the country throwing and doing that stuff. And so I think he's a very mature kid who's going to come in and compete for our job. All right. I mean, and we told him this is not your job to lose. You're going to come in and compete for the job for sure. Because we have some other good young kids in our program as well that have been, that have kind of paid their dues. So we have a number of great kids in that program or in that part of our program. How hard will they want to work? How do some of them transition into, playing a varsity, type of level now? We have a lot of really, really good big kids in that class. So we have all the parts in that group to be able to be really successful. And so that's a group that we're going to continue to push and challenge because I think they have the ability to be very, very good.
Yeah, boy, that's something for the future though. Then there are 3 kids that you mentioned there that were on my Super State 9th grade team last year as well. So that's a pretty good core to build around too. But
Yep.
I tell you what, though, as talented, and talk a little bit about John Pargo, as talented as he is, and he just flashes down that field on special teams. He's got tremendous speed. But best thing about him is what a great kid, what a great attitude. He comes up to you, he's smiling. Even though he was on the varsity team last year, he would still go to the freshman games and cheer on his classmates as well, and just a smile on his face all the time. And you love to see those kind of kids that are not only talented, but they do the right things and they carry themselves the right way too.
Yeah, he's super infectious in terms of his personality. I mean, he that really wears off on people, and I think they love that. He's one of those kids. He's one of those young guys that when he came to prep, a lot of people told him he wasn't going to be able to do some things, right? And he's one of those that has proven a lot of people wrong. He's doing tremendous in school. He's got over a 3.0 in school and doing great. And I know a lot of people, weren't sure if he was going to be able to handle the rigor at Creighton Prep or not. He's hit it out of the park, and so I think he's got that competitiveness and that edge about him that he's he just wants to prove people wrong, and he's going to be a great one for us, no question.
Yeah, and I saw that he was wrestling this winter as well, and so we always like the wrestler football combo as well.
Yeah.
So that's going to
He
be a
took
good.
his lumps there. He was wrestling it
Yeah.
in that 50-pound range with all those older guys that have been wrestling for a long time, and he took his licks. But I tell you what, he's going to be better because of it.
Oh yeah, without a question. So as well. So let's jump over here to the screen share here for a second, and we're gonna jump up here because I want to go over here and I want to look at before we do that. I want to look at your schedule here
Yeah.
for the upcoming year as well. And again, we can kind of show off some of the technology here for a second. I'll get out the stamp onto here. So looking at that schedule.
Yeah,
Man, that's tough.
pretty
That's
easy.
tough.
Pretty easy stuff. Right? Well, I can't be. I look at last year's schedule, and last year's schedule was equally as tough. Right, our district was unbelievably tough the last 2 years, and so I really like our schedule. I mean, it has a great mix of teams that we haven't played a lot of. Shoot, we have 3 Lincoln schools. We haven't, and I know in the history of prep they said they've never played 3 Lincoln schools in a season before. When you open up with West Side, which is great, I love opening up with, we've opened up with North, we've opened up with West Side. I mean, really every year I've been there, we've had West Side, North, and now West Side, and right away that gets your kids' attention, and that's what I like about it. They know what you're going to get. We work extremely hard in the off season because of that week 1 game. So I'm excited about playing West Side again. I think they're going to have a great team, probably preseason 1 or 2 probably in there. They should be, because they deserve that opportunity to be that preseason rank. So, we've got a lot to prove, and I think that gives us an opportunity to go over to West Side and have an opportunity to do that, on week 1.
Yeah, and boy, that will be then that will be what, 3 out of your last 4 games, is it? Would have been down at West Side, is going back to last year, right?
Yeah, we actually have not played West Side in a true home field because when we 2 years ago we were supposed to play them at Burke. It got rained out. It was lightning out and we moved it. It was a Thursday night game. We moved it to Friday and we played it at Benson. So we didn't even really get to play them in a home setting at that point either. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and we'll play them over there again. And our kids get excited to play it. They get excited to play it, and let's, great kickoff for the. I know it's on. It's a Thursday night game on TV too, so it'll kick off the football season a little bit.
Yeah, and what a great atmosphere down there too. Sometimes, we go to the games, and maybe the stands aren't as full as maybe they should be. That's never a problem with West Side and Prep. The game, the regular season game last year, I don't know how many people were there, but it was standing room only around the entire field as well. So
it's a great rivalry, and it's a great place to watch a football game over there. All right. I just remember my first year at Prep. We played over at West Side, opening game. We won on a last second, on a pass to Mason Armstead, who was a sophomore at the time, with about, I don't know, under a minute to play or something like that it was. And I think they estimated there was over 10,000 people or something at the football game. So it was pretty amazing. And it's like that every time we play West Side though, which is awesome.
Yeah. So, those early season games like that, I think that it's also, important to understand that, if you lose to Omaha West Side, then it's not the end of the world here. You've got 8 more games on the regular season schedule as well. So there's an opportunity to go out and, hey, let's see where we're at right now. And, if we don't get this one here, then we're going to get back to work, and we're going to find out where we need to get better at as well. And then you go down to Coach Williams' team down at Papillion La Vista. They've got Cole Price and great running back.
Former player of mine, Timmy Williams. Timmy Williams, a former player of mine at Gross Catholic High School when I was an assistant coach. So he and I had talked prior to the schedules that we wanted to put each other on the schedule list. So that'll be a fun game with them over there. And again, they have a really good running back, and they're gonna he'll do great things over there because he's a really good coach and does a nice job. So
Yeah, and we're going to get him on here. We're going to get him on here soon too. I talked to him a little bit the other day as well, so we'll have him on at some point too. And then week 3, your first home game here, defending state champions Bellevue West. And I'll tell you what, the thing about Bellevue West is that they lost a lot of talent and experience, but that cupboard's not bare down there at all.
Oh no, no,
Very
they've done a great job there, and Mike does a great job, with his guys down there, and they played great defense last year, which was, I think, the difference for them, and I think, he'd be the first one to probably tell everybody that, but they did. They played great defense, and then you put that great defense with the explosive offense, that makes for a lethal combination in terms of how good your team is. But that'll be a fun home opener for us, and be exciting to play the defending state champs. And again, another game that you can try to prove see how good you are, and to see what you need to work at, and because again, if you lose the game, it's not the end of the world type of situation. You can learn a lot from those games, and Southeast is the same way. You will go to Southeast, Southeast, they're going to have they have another great team, and they're going to be super physical, and that's what we're our guys need to understand that, that's the level of physicality that we need to play. Then you have Millard West, who that starts the district then. So our districts, Millard West, North Platte, Northeast, and Lincoln East, with a Papillion South in there as a non-district game near the end. So I like our district with a nice mix of different teams. We haven't played a lot of these teams. We have not played in a little while. West Side is really the only one. We've played Papio in the last 2 years ago. We played Bell West in the playoffs 2 years ago, and beat them in my first year, and beat them in the quarterfinals over there. But we haven't played Southeast in a long time. Millard West, we played in the playoffs 2 years ago. North Platte, I know they had in a couple of years ago. Northeast, we played a couple of years ago. So, I mean, there are teams that we haven't seen in a few at least in one schedule cycle, and maybe a couple schedule cycles for some of the teams.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if I had to maybe put a label on that schedule there, very physical football teams. I mean, by the end of the year, you guys are going to be one of two things. You're going to be very battle tested here, or you're going to be like the walking wounded here.
We're going to be beat up. Well, the one thing about prep is we do have some depth, and that's the nice thing, is we do have, we'll have 210 boys out for football, 9-12. So you're going to have a lot of kids out, and we always do that. And so everybody asks me, hey, what's the difference between Class A and Class B? And I mean, obviously there's some size difference, there's some speed difference, but I think the most important part is the depth. I mean, everybody has 2 or 3 good players at positions versus maybe just one good player at a position in Class B football, and again, I think that's the biggest difference. And again, you look at these teams, and all these have great traditions and great coaches, and they're all going to be very, very good, and it'll be a fun fall in 2020.
Well, and also, it definitely looks front loaded as well. Not to say that the teams on the backside of that schedule are not quality, because we know what Coach Gingery at Lincoln East and Papillion South, and the way that they're coming up as well. But you ought to have a pretty good idea about your team. I would say after week 5 for sure, you ought to say, hey, this is who we are, and this should be what we can be. I would think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think we're going to learn a lot about ourselves, and it'll be a great test and a great challenge for us. But that's why we play. We didn't come here to eat ice cream. We came here to play good football teams and try to win championships.
All right. Well, let's jump in the way back time machine here, because I had mentioned to you that I wanted to kind of take you back to your days at Schuyler and your state championship team in 1986, and I was able to find a nice all-state team picture here that you can see. And if I scroll down, well, there's your friend, your great friend, quarterback Paul Check, of course.
Great buddy of mine. We lived right across the alley from each other in Schuyler, Nebraska. He and I could throw a rock from our backyards. We spent a lot of time together. Paul and I did. Great
Yeah.
player, great friend.
You betcha. And so then if I can scroll down here, if you look on the left-hand side here, and I could probably get out the drawer here again, but there is.
You know, the old neck roll.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, the old neck roll. Everybody wore them back then, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
did, but I'll tell you what. So back at Skyler there, I'm going to go back to 85 here for a second, because you guys go into the playoffs that year and you lost in the first round, and you lost to Columbus Scotus. It was 7-0
Yep.
as well. So when you went into the next year, in your senior year, did you have an idea that you were going to be state championship level at that point, or kind of take us back to that and maybe what happened in the off season to say, hey, let's get this thing a year from now?
Well, I think it started even back when we were sophomore. I mean, great class. And that class, when we were sophomores, we went 1-8, and we got the snot beat out of us, everybody. But majority of the guys that were starting was our sophomore group. Okay. And so I think it was after that season that guys just that, you know what, we need to get in the weight room. We had a head coach who was a big powerlifting guy, and Bill Kuchera at that time. And so he brought in a strength and conditioning program like no one had ever seen at Schuyler before. And a lot of weren't doing those kinds of things, or at least to that level yet. And we bought in big time. And I think when we did that, and that really changed the course. And we were a talented group, but that top of it, I think, made us that much better than everyone played when it came to our senior season. We were preseason 1 in speed that year, and we didn't lose a game. We were number 1 the entire year. And that was tough. I mean, that was like a tough, but you know what, at the end of the day, I don't know if anybody even talked about that. It was just a matter of, we just went out and wanted to win. We played together. We'd known each other for a long time, just like, like small towns do. Right. And I think that's an advantage that smaller communities and have, I think, in any state, is you have those kids together. I always tell our guys at prep, I said, we don't have that, because to try to build that kids from so many different places, as into our building as a freshman, and we have to try to build that bond and camaraderie that small schools have been building for years, and we had that at Schuyler. And I think that was something that was a lot of fun. I was just texting with a buddy today that was our center. We still communicate with each other. We still talk to each other. We got together after, I think, during this break this year, and out in Elkhorn at an establishment, and we had a couple of soda pops and reminisced and talked a little bit about some of those things. But those are all great guys that I would do anything for, because it was a tremendous time. It was great for Schuyler at that time. And it was really a great team. That a lot of fun to be on, for sure.
Yeah, so almost unbelievably almost 35 years then, if my math is correct.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. Right.
Hey, I'm getting up there too. I was like I said, I was 11 or 12 at that time. Also, I've got some details on here that I got then, because I was really interested in kind of that playoff run that you guys have. So opening round, you guys beat Wayne, and you had beaten Wayne in the regular season.
Yeah.
As well. And I read some newspaper clippings, and you mentioned Coach Kuchera, and without knowing his personality and maybe kind of what he was like as well, he had mentioned in that game that maybe you guys didn't play your best game, that you got a lead and maybe a little complacency sets in, and that. And then you go on to that quarterfinal game against York, who
Yep.
you had also beaten in the season as well. Now, this one had some different circumstances with it, because the weather actually delayed the game, and so instead of it being played on Monday, they played the playoff games back then on Monday.
Yeah.
The game was moved to Tuesday afternoon, and if I remember correctly, they were just terrible conditions. It was cold. The fields
Yeah.
were frozen.
They were.
terrible weather conditions.
We didn't even wear cleats on the field. I mean, they had to come in and they took an actual street sweeper and to get the snow off the field. And even with that, it was a pretty much a sheet, like a sheet of ice. And it was like that everywhere in the eastern part of the state because a huge snowstorm came through. They canceled all the games and they moved them to the next day. And so we basically wore flat bottom type shoes. I wore the old nub turf shoes, with the little black rubber nubs on the bottom. That's what I ended up wearing. I could get way more traction than the actual screw in cleats because that was basically like, just cleats on top of ice, which was impossible to even run in. And so, yeah, it was tough conditions, which was an equalizer because we had just beaten them. We had shut them out several weeks prior to that at the end of the year. And so, the weather is always the great equalizer, and I hear coaches say that all the time. And in that particular day, and they had a good team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they had good players with a good team. But the weather did, kind of equalize some of that stuff out for them, which then it ends up going to overtime, and we end up winning the game in overtime.
We had three of them.
Yeah. And so we win in several overtimes, and everybody from York thinks there was a controversial call at the end of the game, and whether it was or wasn't, typically the people that lose say that, and I don't have a problem saying that because we had just beaten them several weeks before pretty handily, and so they had a good team. We won the game, and then we play a really good Blair team in the state semifinals.
Yeah. So one thing about the York game that I think it just goes to illustrate how difficult that it can be to win these state titles. I say that all the time, especially in wrestling here. I mean, these things. These titles, they just don't grow on trees onto here. And every team, you can probably look at every state champion in history, and at some point you've had some adversity. So you think about how close that maybe you were to not winning a state title and maybe not even getting to the semifinals as well. It takes you 3 overtimes to beat York. So a real gut check, obviously, in that game.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to win a state title as a player and as a coach, and you've got to have a little bit of luck along the way in all of those, and you can say that at every level. I mean, every team that's won, you can look back at a game or a situation that has maybe gone their way a little bit and helped them propel them into that championship year, and I think that's not uncommon anywhere. But I think you make some of those breaks, and I think with your preparation, I think you give yourself an opportunity to have some of those breaks sometimes. But yeah, it was you have to be a little bit lucky sometimes. I'd rather be lucky.
So then we look at the semifinals, and one thing that was interesting about that is because the games in the quarterfinals were pushed up to Tuesday. They played the semifinals then on Saturday, so you had a short turnaround time, and it was Schuyler and Blair, and they were the 1 and 2 teams the whole season. So of course, a lot of people thought, well, this is the true state champion. And on the other side, of course, you guys were familiar with Aurora, and I know that Coach Kuchera thought, well, Aurora is going to win that game against Imperial, so we get by Blair. Aurora is a Central 10 conference opponent that we're familiar with as well. So you go into that game again, a quick turnaround, and this is a Blair team that I was kind of mentioning to you before we jumped on the live here. I was a kid. I was 12 years old, and Bennington at the time, one of the smallest Class B schools, actually played Blair in the opening round, and for some reason it was at Bennington, and I don't 100% remember the reason why. And one thing that I remember about Blair was that they had about twice the number of players on the roster as Bennington did, and Bennington took them 17-14 at the time, and we were actually driving for a winning score and got intercepted on the 50-yard line as well. So, and then of course Blair goes and quarterfinals. They had a tough game against Omaha Roncalli. They had to win in overtime on the last play of the game, I believe, too. So you got two teams here that quick turnarounds, for them, and you know it's going to be a physical game. It's on your home field, of course, and that Blair team that was Dan Stellans and Scott Johnson were kind of their headline type
Yep.
of guys as well, and they come up there. And
Tim Severs
I
was really good. Tim Severs was really good at that
Mhm.
time. He was a linebacker. I think Dan Atkins was an offensive lineman that was really good too for them.
Yep. Yep.
Mark, let's see. Selwyn was really good. I mean, they had a lot of really good athletes on that team.
But you guys went into that game though with a chip on your shoulder because, believe it or not, you guys were number one. But I think that there was this thought out there that Blair's just too big and they're too strong, and you know they're big bad Blair or whatever. And you guys go in and you guys win that game 10-0, and I believe you had something like 36 carries in that game. So it wasn't a big passing game whatsoever. But I remember Coach Lell, you know, the legendary coach from Blair, 10-0. But he said you guys just whipped them. He said it wasn't a contest. He said that was by far the best team that Blair had played all year. He said, and he was fairly certain that was the best game that you guys had played all year as well.
Yeah, we actually had the ball inside the 15-yard line 3 other times, and didn't come away with any points. And so, I mean, for him to say that is probably that's probably right. And the fact that we moved the ball on them. It was a very physical game, most physical high school football game that I ever played in. But that's what we expected, because that's what both of the teams were kind of built on, being really physical. We had some good size. They had better size. But at the end of the day, I think it was a lot of fun with 2 really good football teams. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you get by that one, you're in the state finals. And of course, back then it was Memorial Stadium. It was played on, you know, a home site, and you get Aurora and kind of the legendary Tom Haas out of Aurora, and a team that you were familiar with. And I couldn't find this out for sure, but I'm certain that you played them earlier on in the year as well.
We did not. We had not played them, and so we'd heard about them. We'd seen them. Being in the Central 10, we'd see Aurora at every track meet. We played them in basketball and in the conference tournament, but we didn't play them in football for whatever reason. And the one thing about that playoff run is we played all 4 of those games at Schuyler in our home field. That wouldn't I don't think that would happen nowadays. It just worked out where we had the first game at home because we were the higher seed. The second game we were the higher seed, and the other team that won was the home team, and so both home teams won, and so the higher seed gets the game again, and that happened again in the semifinals, and so it happened all the way through to where we had all 4 rounds were played at Schuyler, which again is that's unheard of in terms of even playing 3 rounds in your home field anymore. But I think that benefited us for sure. I think help at home, but to be able to play Tom Haas and Jack Guggenmoss, who's a really good friend of mine, was the head coach there at that time at Aurora, and man, what a great team, well coached, tough. At the end of the day, I felt like we were destined to win that darn thing, though, just because I think we'd paid our dues along the way as young guys. We'd worked hard, and I think we put ourselves in position to win a state championship the right way, and we did that, which was fun.
5,000 people at that state championship game, which is
a Class B game. That's pretty impressive for a small town game like that.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, you bring in everyone else from all the other small towns around. It's the top thing as well. So you go into that game, and I mean, you're obviously, even though you don't have the internet back then, all that, you're obviously aware of who Tom Haas is, right? I mean, the guy is.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'd see him in state track meet. We'd see him at the conference track meet. He was the state record holder in the long jump, and and then so I mean, what kind of athlete you're dealing with at quarterback there, and he was all of that. I mean, he was, and he's a good friend of mine. I just ran into him not too long ago out at Costco, and he and I were teammates and in the same class at Nebraska together. So, again, I see him quite often, and it's always fun to see those guys and reminisce, and to look back, 30 some odd years later, and know that you competed against each other is really kind of a fun deal.
Yeah. So something I gathered from that game was that Aurora, they ran into a lot of penalty problems.
They did. They had a lot of penalties. I don't know exactly how many they had in the game, but they had quite a few. A couple key ones in the fourth quarter when they were driving on. It was one big play. I know they got a chop block or a crack block, and that was illegal. That they got called back, if I remember right, which again stalled a drive for them.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna throw out a few names out here for you. Obviously, you can see some of them on that Class B All-State team, of course. And this is the Super State team. This wasn't just Class B. So, Paul Check, you ran. I mean, almost unheard of back in those days. I mean, now you get guys that rack up a lot of statistics, but you ran for almost 2,200 yards. Back. That's unbelievable. As well. But you had a great supporting cast and mentioned Paul as well. And then on here, you also had Tom Kazik, senior.
He went up to Wayne and played up at Wayne State, played up there. He was a better nose guard. I think he should have been an all-stater on the defensive line. Or he was on the defensive line. And he was. And if you ask, I know when Coach Guggenmoss would go and talk at clinics that next year, he would always draw, and we ran a 5-2 defense, and Tom played the nose guard for us, and he would draw this great big N right in the middle of our defense, and because they couldn't block it, nobody could block it. I mean, he was athletic, he was big, tough, and he made our defense. There's no question about that. As good as our offense was then, because Paul Check was a great quarterback, went to UNO and started several years at UNO, and our defense was probably the key to us winning that championship that year.
Yeah, and look at the other guy on the All-State team onto there, little guy, and I remember him because he was a state wrestling champion. Yep. That's Brad Lane. Brad Lane was in '86 was 145-pound state wrestling champion.
He was. I always made fun of him. He unfortunately he's passed now. Unfortunately, several years ago. And unfortunate deal for the Lane family, but great wrestler. I always gave him a bad time because he was so thin during wrestling. I mean, he would lose 40 pounds. And nowadays, I don't know if they would let him do that, with some of the restrictions and stuff that they have now, because I think he lost way more than he should have. But he was such a great wrestler, and that made him such a great linebacker. He and I played the two inside linebacker spots on defense. So he and I played right next to each other and in that defense. And he had such a great nose for the ball, and he was such a great tackler. And it was because of that whole wrestling background that made him that good.
Yeah. The one guy that I can't figure out how we didn't end up on the Class B All-State team was your receiver, Baumert.
Paul Baumert. Yeah. Baumert, a great wide receiver. Walked on at Nebraska when I went down there too. He and I went down there together, and then he ended up going and transferring to UNO and played at UNO. And so he and Paul then played together at UNO. But Paul's a great wide receiver, really did. Great route runner, really good hands, ran well. And it was unfortunate that he didn't make an All-State team for sure.
I'll tell you what, you look at that Class B team as a whole. I don't know if you played Grand Island CC, old future Husker, San Diego Charger NFL guy, John Perella.
We didn't play Grand Island Central Catholic. We played Blair. We played Grand Island Northwest. We played Crete. We did not play Aquinas or Shadron or Gothenburg. We played York.
Yeah, and Gothenburg was ranked third going into the playoffs, and they said they got upset by Aurora.
Yeah, my college roommate actually was their quarterback at that time, Shane Geiken, who was out there. So he was my college roommate, and he played quarterback and middle linebacker for the Gothenburg Swedes. And we gave him a bad time. He wore a neck roll playing quarterback back then. Wow. So that's how old school that was.
I assume his sons are pretty good players out there these days. So.
Yeah. I think he's got Shane's got a brother that has some kids out there too. So those either sons or nephews. I know that.
Yeah, hey, you look over here on the right as well. There's Daryl Isey from Creighton Prep
Yep.
there with this photo as well. So yeah, really good times. Those were great days growing up here. These names, um, just just a lot of fun. You know, we really as young kids looked up to these guys here, and you know, I would ask you. We could probably talk for hours about the differences between the game, the way it's played today versus the game that was played then.
Yeah.
I know one thing that I was able to pick up as well is that in that state championship game, you didn't get as many carries in the second half. They said you ran into some cramping issues.
Yeah, I did, and we were able to throw football. They were stacked box, so I know threw the ball a little bit down the field.
Yeah,
That
sure.
game.
Oh, hang on one second here.
That game.
Yeah. All right. And so you guys get a state title, and then of course you go on to the University of Nebraska, and you know, back then, of course, we had you weren't a scholarship, you were a walk-on guy, correct?
I was on
Yep.
my first year, and I was on scholarship my last year. Then after my redshirt year, so my first and after football, my redshirt year, I earned scholarship that spring.
Yeah. So what kind of just maybe briefly tell us a little bit about your time at Nebraska, and maybe your you know, your relationship with Coach Osborne, maybe some of the other guys on the team. It had to be just a great time to you know, to be a part of the Huskers. You grow up as a kid here, and hey, I'm gonna play for Coach Osborne in Nebraska. So walk us through that at that time a little bit.
Was you know, it was a fun time. You know, you grow up. I was born and raised in Nebraska, so I mean, you listen to Nebraska, a few games, you know, and you kind of get in your blood, and so that's you know, you kid dream about. And I think at that time, probably more kids at that point dreamed about it than maybe they do now. I'm not sure why, but maybe it's just maybe the lack of success that they've had here the last 10 or 15 years has maybe driven that a little. Uh, but you know, you go down there, and now you're a small fish in a big pond, and everybody that you're playing with was their team's best player, and you have to go down there, and it takes a lot of mental toughness, and you got to be resilient to, you know, the whole thing going down there from now going to a small high school to a big university campus, and going to school and trying to figure out where your classes at, in classes with 300 people in a lecture hall, to playing against and practicing against some of the best players in the country. But at that point we had, you know, there was a freshman team, so we everybody played on the freshman team except for a couple of guys, you know, a couple of guys that I know that they brought up our class, but it wasn't many. And so we played a full freshman schedule, and then you redshirt as a sophomore, and so you really don't get the feel of what Nebraska football in terms of practicing and games and those kind of things really until about your second or third being there, because you're on the freshman team, but you practice separate, a separate coaching staff. Your redshirt year, you're basically a blocking dummy for an entire year. But then I think that part, paying your, is so critical that a lot of people do nowadays. And I think paying your dues, going through and building some of that toughness as a red shirt really separates and thins the herd a little bit, because some guys could do it, some guys decided not to do it. We had a guy on our freshman team, and on senior day 5 years later we ran out 23 guys. And so you know, you kind of look around and you go, okay, well, the guys that were able to stick it out, they were the guys that kind of you know, dealt with all the things the right way. And I think that, you know, going through that program, I tell people I became a tougher person coming what you have to deal with on a daily basis, the grind, the academics, the physicality, the demand for time all the time. I mean, it's constant 24/7, 365, man. I mean, you're football school. I mean, it was just, that's what you did. And but at the end of I wouldn't have traded that for anything in the world. And I'm where I'm at today because I think those experiences.
Yeah. So at what point did you decide to say, hey, maybe this coaching thing is something that I might be interested in?
Yeah, Bob Jensen just asked me that the other day, actually, at Huskerland. And, it's something I've always wanted to do. Athletics. I was a multi-sport, 3-sport athlete in high school. I played football, basketball, ran track, and played baseball in the summer. And I never had a time off. And I would do that all over again. And I encourage kids to do that again. And so many kids don't think they can. And you really can. If you're good and you're athletic, people are going to find you. And I have so many parents and people that tell me that, they can't do that. They have to specialize. And I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I mean, I can, I think there's a lot of benefits to playing a lot of seasons. And I think a lot of coaches are looking for guys that are multi-sport kids. You look at the number of guys in the first round of the NFL draft, how many multi-sport athletes they were in that. They might not have been 3 sports, but there's a lot of sport guys who were drafted in the NFL first round a year. And I think those are things that I think are super important. And so I always felt like coaching would keep me around athletes, and that's really what it's done. I love sports, and I want kids to have the same experiences and that I had in terms of success, failures, overcoming adversity, and all the things that sports is supposed to teach you, because I think it makes them better. And both of my kids were multi-sport athletes, 3-sport athletes at Gross Catholic when they went to school there. And I think it's something that I think every kid needs to do, and I encourage our guys to do it. And we have a lot more multi-sport kids, at least a lot of 2-sport kids in our program at Creighton Prep, a lot more than people think.
Yeah. So ironically, the Class A champion in 1986 was Creighton Prep, which is where you're coaching today as well. Probably way back then, you probably couldn't have ever envisioned and said, someday I'm going to be the coach at over at Omaha.
I don't think you could have asked me that 10 years ago, and I would have probably said the same thing. It's just a fortunate situation for me and my family to be at Prep.
Yeah. So just quickly, and then I'm going to let you be on your way here. We don't want to take up your whole night here, but I was going to ask you a little bit about then the influences then on your coaching career. Obviously, Coach Osborne at college.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned Coach Kuchera at Schuyler. How big of an impact did they have in terms of your style of coaching and maybe some of the things that they've taught you about? Here's how you structure a practice. Here's how you organize a staff, those type of things.
Yeah, it's always interesting because everywhere I've gone, I've tried to learn something from someone. I always tell people, I said, whether it's a positive or a negative situation, you can always learn something from that situation. And I've tried to do that in every situation I've been as a coach. I did that as an assistant coach at Gross when I first started there. I have I have a number of guys that have helped me learn along the way. And, I think guys like Jerry Shank, who was the head coach at Gross at that time, he took me in and kind of gave me some opportunities, and I was appreciative of that. Paul Halpine, was the offensive coordinator at Gross Catholic there then. And I still keep in contact with him, and he's actually come back and watched a couple of our prep games here the last few years. But he's a guy I learned a great deal from in terms of offense and how to treat kids and how to coach kids. And I think he was a great influence for me as well. Mike Dempsey, who's the defense or the head basketball coach at Gross Catholic and now the AD there now. I coached basketball with him for a long time, my first 8 years there at Gross. And again, I learned a ton from him about how to motivate kids and what buttons to push and how to treat kids and how to work hard in coaching. And so I learned a lot from those guys. Um, Coach Osborne, obviously, Coach Kuchera, I a lot from. Larry McGowan, who was our defensive coordinator at Schuyler at that time, I learned a great deal from. He's a great person, man, great father. Just was a really great example for me as I was coming through high school, and along with all those other guys too. But Coach Osborne, in terms of, you talk about how do I coach and philosophy and those kinds of things, I think practice organization. I think utilizing your staff and delegating things to your staff, I think, is super important. It's hard to do sometimes, to let go of those reins sometimes for young guys and guys, but I think you have to do that or you're going to kill yourself doing this, because you can't do all of it. Maybe in a smaller school you can, but I think as you go up the ranks and you're in bigger schools, I don't think you can do that. I think you've got to be able to trust the guys that are around you. I'm not a big micromanager at all, and you can ask anybody that's ever coached for me. I've hired you to coach, and I am not going to tell you how to coach unless you force my hand. But I'll interject things and I'll say, hey, maybe we need to try this, or maybe we need to do it this way. So when I hire a guy, I trust the fact that they're going to teach the kids the right way, and I know the guys when I hire them, that they're good people and that they're going to treat the kids the right way. They got to treat them the right way, and they got to be good people. And so those are all things I learned from Coach Osborne. And I think, you've heard him talk about, you have to surround yourself with great people. And there's no question that I've done that everywhere I've been. And hopefully guys appreciate the fact that I've let them coach and not micromanage them and tell them how to do things all the time. But again, it's, all of those guys have been great influences for me as I've come up the ranks.
Yeah, and maybe again something else, just in terms of how you've maybe had to evolve with the coaching. I would guess that, I haven't been a coach myself, but I've been around high school sports long enough. But I would guess that, at some point you had to say, okay, the way that maybe somebody coached back 35 years ago is different today because the kids are different, right? Like,
Yep.
there's certainly going to be things that I can assure you from my own personal perspective that, my high school coach, that he would never be able to get away with the things that they did back in the day. It was a lot different. So I would guess that at some point you've also probably had to kind of maybe change how you manage them, because again, kids are different.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think there's a lot of coaches that try to coach every kid the exact same way, and you can't do that. I think there's every kid's different. Every individual is different in terms of what buttons need to be pushed. And so you've got to really get to know a kid. And I think what I've done is I've done a good job of building relationships with kids and really getting to know them. And whether it's kids that are in middle school or fifth or sixth grade, or they're kids that are playing for you, I think building those relationships are really important, and really knowing, what they're all about and what makes them tick. And one of the things that we did and that we talked about as an offensive this year in the off season, which we just talked about, is we're asking all of our out of our positions, how do you coached? And so we're asking them to give us some feedback. Are you a guy that can take a butt chewing once in a while? Are you a guy that needs a pat on the back, and needs a little bit more direction, a little bit more encouragement? I mean, those kinds of things in a little softer way. And so we're asking our guys, how do you want to be coached? And I think that's been really beneficial for our coaches moving forward, especially the guys that have been maybe just, I'm going to coach everybody this kind of the same way. And they figured out that, every kid wants to be coached maybe a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think regardless, I mean, one thing that I have kind of found with kids, multi-sports, both wrestling and football, is that regardless of maybe how they receive the coaching, I found that the kids honestly want to be held accountable in some form or fashion here.
No question. No
you
question.
know, they are almost practically begging for that to say, okay, I just made a mistake here, and if I come off of the field here, my coaches are going to hold me accountable for the mistake that I've done, and so I think in that regard, I think that the kids are very similar to how they used to be as well. But they're looking for that kind of direction,
No
and
question about it. I agree totally, 100%. And they are kids want to be held accountable. They want structure, and at the same time, they understand that accountability and that structure is benefiting them to being successful.
yeah. Yeah, well, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time and kind of taking some time out of your schedule here to talk shop, as we would say, as well.
No, I think this
You
is a
know,
great deal. I think, yeah,
yeah,
a great format. And I think you have a lot of potential here. I think
yeah.
we were talking about some things prior to coming on the air, but I think there's some ideas down the road that I think you can tap into as you move forward with some of the other coaches too. That would be really cool to kind of build this up. And I think you got a good thing going. It's pretty neat. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, this has been great. Hopefully, what we can do is continue to, generate interest in the sport. We like anything, football is we've got to keep the numbers up
Yep.
and keep the interest going as well. And one thing, just like wrestling, like to be able to promote the kids and the hard work that they put in, and so I think this will be a great way to get the information out here too. So hopefully, Coach, as we get a little bit closer to the season as well, we'd love to have you back on at some point. And
Sure. No, I'd love that anytime. I mean, really,
yeah,
if you're looking for somebody, I'd love to be able to do it.
yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, really appreciate that, and like I said, we'll talk to you, I'm sure, as we get closer. Hopefully, they'll have our summer 7-on-7 ARQ. I know you like to be out there and
Yeah, we'll
work
see
with
what
the young
happens here. I
guys.
know they canceled the spring one, and but we'll see. I mean, time will tell. This will all go away. It's just gonna take a little bit, but we'll be back to normal before you know it.
Yeah, well, thanks for all you do for the sport as well. I mean, geez, a native Nebraskan here, small town guy as well, and really cool. Really honored to have you on the show. So appreciate everything.
You bet. I
Okay,
appreciate
we'll
it.
talk to you down the road. Thank you, Coach.
You bet. Thank you.
You're welcome.